They mocked the black woman in first class. Then she made them regret everything. "You can't just sit anywhere you want, ma'am," the flight attendant snapped, her tight smile more of a warning than a welcome. Ava Mitchell stood motionless in the first-class aisle, her boarding pass gripped tightly in her hand, the sharp edge pressing into her palm like a blade. Seat 2A was hers. She had paid nearly $2,000 for it, non-refundable, non-transferable. But now some smug, middle-aged white man was sprawled out there, sipping champagne like he owned the sky. He didn't even look up when she arrived, just pointed lazily toward the back of the plane. "Pretty sure they made a mistake," he said. "This is a reserved seat." She didn't flinch. "I know. It's reserved for me." That's when the laughter started. Not from him, from the two passengers across the aisle, an older couple dressed in matching golf polos and the kind of entitlement you couldn't fake. The woman leaned toward her husband and whispered, not softly, "Must be some kind of promotion. Or charity." The man chuckled. "Guess they're letting anyone up here now." Ava's jaw clenched, but she didn't move. She refused to. Not this time. "I'm sorry," the attendant said, glancing at Ava's boarding pass without even reading it. "Our system must have reassigned your seat. You'll need to move to 18C in economy." "No." Ava's voice was low but firm. "I booked 2A. I paid for 2A. And I'm not moving." "Ma'am, you're disrupting the boarding process," the flight manager barked as he arrived, his name tag reading Steve Powers. His gruff voice carried a tone that made it sound like she'd already committed a crime. "We're going to need you to cooperate." Ava stared at him. "I am cooperating. By sitting in the seat I paid for." The businessman, later identified as Charles Whitman, finally deigned to acknowledge her with a smirk. "You know, the airline sometimes gives priority to frequent flyers. Maybe stick with coach until you level up." She raised an eyebrow, her tone even. "You think miles make you matter more?" Steve stepped between them. "Look, this isn't about race or status or any of that. It's just policy." "But your policy just conveniently favors white men in suits, huh?" Ava asked, voice steady but rising. "Because I noticed no one else got reassigned." "You need to lower your voice," Steve said, his face reddening, "or you will be removed." The cabin was silent now. Every passenger had stopped pretending not to listen. Phones were out. One young black woman near the rear subtly tilted hers to film. Ava noticed, and was glad. "If I get removed," Ava said, pulling her phone from her purse, "everyone watching will see exactly why." Steve leaned in close, his breath sharp with mint and disdain. "You really want to make this a scene?" "I didn't make the scene," Ava replied, lifting her phone higher. "You did when you gave my seat away because someone decided I didn't look the part." Charles scoffed, shifting uncomfortably in 2A. "You're really pulling the race card." "I don't need to pull anything," Ava snapped. "I'm living it." Steve's walkie crackled, and for a moment he looked unsure, glancing down the aisle toward the cockpit. Then he sighed heavily and waved a hand toward Ava's boarding pass. "Fine," he muttered. "Stay in 2A, but this is your last warning." She sat, spine straight, heart pounding, but not from fear, from fury, from knowing how close she'd come to being pushed out, again, just for taking up space they didn't think she deserved. And then, right as she was strapping in, she caught Charles muttering under his breath, "Unbelievable. They're so sensitive now." She turned her head slowly. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" He blinked. "Nothing." She smiled. "Good, because if you ever speak to me again, I'll make sure your next flight is in handcuffs." He looked away, but Ava wasn't done. "Hey," she said, speaking up now loud enough for everyone to hear. "Quick poll, how many of you think I'd be sitting in this seat if I were a white man in a $3,000 suit?" Silence. Then someone, An older black man in the last row of first class spoke up. "No way in hell they'd question you," he said. A few others nodded. Steve stiffened, his hands balling at his sides, but he didn't say anything. Ava stared out the window, her expression calm, but her chest still tight. The engines began to rumble. They were finally preparing for takeoff. And as the wheels lifted off the ground, Ava closed her eyes and whispered, "You're gonna regret this." She didn't mean it like a threat. She meant it like a promise. Because this wasn't the end. It was just chapter 1. And they had no idea who she really was. The turbulence outside was nothing compared to the storm building inside the cabin. 30 minutes into the flight, Ava tried to settle into her seat and breathe. She adjusted her noise-canceling headphones, pulled out her tablet, and attempted to distract herself with notes for the tech summit in Seattle. But the tension in her chest hadn't gone away, not since the moment she was forced to defend her very presence in 2A. She could still feel the heat of every stare, still hear the barely whispered comments behind her, still see Charles Whitman across the aisle in 2B, watching her like she didn't belong, like she was squatting in a world built for men like him. Ava tried to focus on her screen, swiping through the slides of her keynote address, the one she'd been perfecting for weeks, the one that could secure another $10 million in funding for her company, Equinox Analytics. A moment that could shift everything. But then the flight attendant, the same one from earlier, name tag reading Haley, approached with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Excuse me, Ms. Mitchell," she said quietly, glancing around like she didn't want anyone to hear. "There's been a small issue with your onboard meal. It appears your vegan option didn't make it on the flight." Ava looked up, deadpan. "Really? That's interesting because I confirmed it. Twice." "I know. I'm terribly sorry," Haley replied, but her voice was anything but sincere. "It's just a little mix-up, but we do have a spare chicken salad in the back." Ava tilted her head. "Let me guess. That's the same chicken salad you accidentally gave to the woman in 4D who didn't even request one." Haley hesitated. "She seemed hungrier." Ava laughed under her breath. "Right. And I'm guessing I just look like someone who's used to not being served." Haley bristled. "Ma'am, there's no need to get—" "To get what?" Ava said, her voice sharper now, assertive, aware, black. Haley's face turned a shade paler, and she took a step back. "I'm just trying to do my job." "No," Ava said calmly. "You're trying to keep me quiet, but it's not gonna work." Before Haley could respond, a loud voice cut through the cabin. "Excuse me, excuse me." A man, mid-50s, round face, graying beard, had stood up from economy and was now walking up the aisle toward first class. His badge hung around his neck, partially obscured by his coat. "I need a word with the passenger in 2A, he said, eyes locked on Ava. The cabin hushed. Haley stiffened. Ava sat upright, narrowing her gaze. "And you are?" she asked. The man flashed his badge quickly. "TSA." "There's been a flag on your boarding pass," he said. "Nothing serious, just a routine security check. We're going to need you to move to the rear of the plane for a brief conversation." Ava blinked. "You want me to walk to the back of the plane, in the middle of the flight, for a security check?" "It's standard procedure, ma'am." "Funny," she said, standing slowly. "I've flown over 80 times in the last year alone. This has never happened." The man didn't blink. "It's probably just random," Charles scoffed. "Nothing's random with people like her." Ava's eyes snapped to him. "Say that again." "Let's not make this worse," the TSA agent said quickly. Haley looked like she wanted to disappear. The other first-class passengers stared, a mix of discomfort and curiosity etched into their features. Ava exhaled slowly. "You know what? Fine. Let's go talk. But I'm recording this." She pulled out her phone again, already live streaming before they made it 3 steps down the aisle. "Hey folks," she said into the lens. "In case you're wondering, this is what traveling while black and successful looks like. First-class ticket, seat confirmed, minding my business, and now I'm being pulled to the back of the plane mid-air. They say it's a random flag, but let's see what they really mean." The agent shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware the camera was on. They reached the galley between business and economy, where he gestured for her to stop. "This will only take a minute." "Then make it fast." He glanced over her shoulder, then leaned in close. "Look, this isn't me. I got a call from higher up. There was a flag on your name before you even boarded." Ava frowned. "From who?" "I don't know. Someone in operations. It came through as a priority. Something about a watch list." Her stomach dropped. "What kind of watch list?" The man shook his head. "I'm just following instructions." "But off the record, you've made someone nervous." Ava stared at him, adrenaline spiking. And then from behind them came a voice she hadn't expected. "Ava." She turned to see a woman in her early 40s stepping out from business class. Tall, Latina, dressed in a dark gray suit with a badge clipped to her blazer, FBI. "Agent Ramirez," the woman said, nodding at the TSA officer. "I'll take it from here." The man stepped back immediately, relieved. Ramirez pulled Ava aside, her voice hushed. "You don't know me, but I know you. And I know what you've built with Equinox. And if someone's trying to flag you mid-flight, it's not about security, it's sabotage." Ava's pulse pounded. "Then who?" Ramirez shook her head. "Not here, not yet. But trust me, you've stirred something. And they don't like women like us making noise in places we're not supposed to reach." Ava's eyes narrowed. "You think this is connected to someone on this flight?" Ramirez didn't answer, but the look in her eyes was enough. Back in her seat minutes later, Ava stared out the window, her mind racing. Someone had flagged her. Someone wanted her out of that seat, and maybe off that plane entirely. And now the game had changed. She wasn't just fighting for a seat. She was fighting something much bigger. And this time she wasn't playing defense. She was going to dig. And when she found out who was behind it, she'd make sure they regretted everything. This wasn't a flight anymore. This was war at 30,000 feet. The turbulence returned with a vengeance. The plane jolted mid-air, sending a sharp gasp rippling through the cabin. Coffee sloshed out of half-filled mugs. Someone screamed in the back. But Ava Mitchell barely blinked. Her eyes were locked on the screen of her phone, where the TSA agent's words played over and over in her mind. "There was a flag on your name before you even boarded, and now an FBI agent had stepped in?" This wasn't paranoia, it was a plot. She tightened her grip on her phone and leaned back in her seat, forcing her breathing to stay calm. But her mind spun like a turbine. Who had the power to get her flagged like that? Why her? And what was waiting once she landed in Seattle? She turned her gaze toward Charles Whitman, still lounging in 2B like the king of the sky, sipping his ginger ale and pretending none of the drama had touched him. But she saw it. The way his eyes darted to her when he thought she wasn't looking. The slight flush on his pale cheeks. The tension in his jaw. He was hiding something. Across the aisle, Haley had returned with a new tray of drinks. She avoided Ava's gaze completely. The tension thickened when Ramirez appeared again, this time in plain view, walking up the aisle toward Ava's seat with purpose. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" she asked. Ava nodded slowly. Ramirez leaned close, her voice low. "I couldn't say much back there, but I have to warn you. Your name is on an unofficial list." "What kind of list?" Ava asked, keeping her voice level. Ramirez hesitated. "It's internal. Certain passengers who are flagged for surveillance or reassessment, depending on how disruptive they are deemed to be. Disruptive how? Ava asked. Because I asked for the seat I paid for. Ramirez's eyes hardened. Because you're successful, Black, and not afraid to speak up, that makes you threatening in certain circles. Ava's jaw clenched. Ramirez continued. These lists aren't public. They're off the books, sometimes passed between airline executives and certain federal contacts. No paper trail, no accountability. But it's real. Ava swallowed hard. So I'm being targeted for existing. And for refusing to shrink, Ramirez said. I've seen 3 other cases like this. Women, minorities, all of them flying first class. All of them ended up humiliated, downgraded, or detained. A beat passed between them. Ava felt her hands tremble, not from fear, but from fury. Ramirez glanced at Charles, then leaned closer. That guy? Whitman? I looked him up. He's not just some rich businessman. He's on the board of an airline lobbying group. The same group that's been pushing for more aggressive customer profiling. Ava's stomach turned. Ramirez stood. Whatever's happening here didn't start today, but you may have just become the face of something bigger than a seat dispute. With that, she walked away, disappearing behind the curtain that separated first class from the cockpit. Ava sat frozen, absorbing it all. She opened her laptop. She didn't wait to land. She began typing. Notes, names, connections, threads. Her inbox buzzed. It was a message from anonymous airline whistle. Subject, watch your back. Inside was a single image. It was a screenshot of an internal memo. The company logo watermarked faintly in the background. It read, Passenger AM, category red, high profile, minimize visibility, reassign if possible, engage FAA contacts. Ava's breath caught. There it was, the proof. Before she could process it, the intercom crackled. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some unexpected air traffic. We'll be making a temporary landing in Boise for a refueling and procedural check. Estimated ground time is 30 minutes. The cabin murmured in confusion, but Ava felt it instantly. This wasn't about air traffic. This was about control. She locked eyes with Charles. He smiled faintly. The plane began its descent, and Ava knew. They weren't just trying to embarrass her anymore. They were trying to bury her. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane touched down in Boise, Idaho. Unexpected, off schedule, and buzzing with unease. Passengers glanced around, confused whispers threading through the cabin like static. But Ava Mitchell knew better. This wasn't routine. This was calculated. She watched as the crew moved briskly, too briskly. Charles Whitman didn't look surprised. He adjusted his cufflinks like he was preparing for a business meeting, not a layover. The smugness in his expression hadn't wavered since the confrontation hours earlier. The moment the jet bridge connected, 2 uniformed airport officers boarded. Ava Mitchell? One asked loudly, standing just a few feet from her seat. Ava's jaw tensed. Yes? We need you to step off the plane with us. It's for a routine inquiry. She stayed seated. Inquiry about what? They exchanged a glance, clearly unprepared for her calm defiance. We were asked to escort you to a holding area. You're not under arrest, but you're being removed from the flight for safety concerns. A ripple moved through the first-class cabin. The woman across the aisle gasped quietly. Haley, the flight attendant, was suddenly nowhere to be seen. Ava stood slowly, gathering her things. She turned to the other passengers, her voice clear and steady. For the record, I've done nothing wrong. I paid for this seat. I've made no threats. I've simply asked to be treated with the same respect as any other passenger in this cabin. The officer shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. As Ava stepped into the aisle, her phone buzzed. It was another anonymous message. Just 3 words. They know everything. Her pulse quickened. The pit in her stomach dropped even deeper. She followed the officers through the terminal, past rows of empty seats and shuttered kiosks, until they reached a bland, windowless room that looked more like an interrogation booth than a holding area. Inside stood a woman Ava hadn't seen before. Mid-40s, dark blazer, clean-cut blonde bob, cold gray eyes. She didn't introduce herself. "You're making quite a stir, Miss Mitchell," she said, gesturing to the single chair. "Sit." Ava stayed standing. "I'd like to know who you are before I take orders from you." The woman smirked. "Let's just say I work for the airline, and the people who sign the real checks." She reached into a folder and pulled out a sheet of paper. It was a dossier, Ava's face printed at the top, followed by lines of personal data, home address, employer, travel history. "Your company has been doing well," the woman continued. "Too well, maybe. You've stepped on toes, made noise." Ava's eyes narrowed. "What does that have to do with my flight being rerouted?" "Everything," the woman said flatly. "This little stunt of yours, recording in the cabin, going viral, embarrassing a platinum-tier board member like Mr. Whitman, people noticed, and they don't like attention." Ava's voice dropped. "So you flagged me before I boarded, downgraded my seat, staged a detour to intimidate me. Let's just say, we believe in protecting our interests." Ava let out a short, sharp breath. "That's called retaliation, and it's illegal." The woman didn't flinch. "You're free to file whatever complaints you like once we're done with our process." "And what is that, exactly?" Ava asked, voice tight. A beat passed. "Making sure you're not a threat," the woman said smoothly. "To our passengers, to our operations, to our brand." She slid another page across the table. This one was a list, a long one. Names, all people of color. At the top, Ava Mitchell. "This isn't just about you," the woman said. "This is a program, internal, confidential. We monitor high-risk passengers, especially the ones who think they're above protocol." Ava stared down at the paper, a dull roar rising in her ears. It was real. Ramirez had been telling the truth. So had the anonymous messages. She looked up. "You call this protocol? This is profiling, harassment." "It's prevention," the woman snapped, "and we've been quite successful at avoiding legal blowback. Until now." Ava's lips curled. "You're afraid." The woman stood. "We're cautious." "No," Ava said, stepping forward. "You're afraid of women like me. Black women who don't sit down when told, who don't shrink, who build something you can't control." The woman's face hardened. "I suggest you watch yourself." "And I suggest you get a lawyer," Ava said, her voice steady. "Because this isn't over." They released her 20 minutes later. No apology, no explanation to the other passengers. Just a cold escort back to the gate and instructions that she would be rebooked on a later flight. But Ava had already started moving. Back at her seat, she powered on her laptop and began writing. Every detail of what had happened since she stepped onto that plane. The demotion, the humiliation, the blacklist. She wouldn't wait for them to write the narrative. She would publish it first. And once the story hit the airwaves, no amount of corporate spin would save them. The red-eye flight out of Boise was half empty, but the air still felt suffocating. Ava Mitchell sat near the back, this time in economy, her back pressed to the cold vinyl seat, and her laptop balanced on her thighs. The bruises on her arms from the officer's grip hadn't faded. Her mind hadn't stopped spinning since that cold room, and the words that still echoed in her ears. High-risk passenger. They had a list. And she was on it. Her hands moved across the keyboard like they had a life of their own, typing out every moment, every slight, every whisper of something deeper than just a seating mistake. The viral post she'd written at the gate in Boise had already passed 70,000 shares. But it wasn't just about the views now, it was about control. They'd tried to strip her of it, but she wasn't letting them dictate the story. She hit publish, then leaned back and closed her eyes. Not 5 minutes later, her phone vibrated. Then again. And again. Lena, her assistant, had sent nearly 10 messages in a row. Lena, something's happening. Post is blowing up. 300,000 views. Call from a reporter at the Tribune. And Ava, look at this. They're coming for you. Attached was a screenshot of a new story. Headline in bold. CEO turned disruptor. Ava Mitchell removed from flight after unruly behavior in first class. Below it was a grainy photo. Her, mid-confrontation. The caption? Passenger causing disturbance, sources say. The bile rose in Ava's throat. They were rewriting the narrative in real time. Her hands shook as she scrolled down to the byline. The article credited anonymous sources close to airline operations. A quote from Charles Whitman himself followed. She was confrontational from the moment she boarded, loud, disruptive. I felt unsafe. Unsafe. A word that hit differently when spoken by a wealthy white man about a black woman who dared to speak up. Ava inhaled sharply, staring out the window into the darkness. The city lights below looked peaceful. But the war she was in was far from quiet. She texted Lena back. AVA, I need a lawyer, one who's not afraid of the noise. And Lena, dig into that list. I want names. As the plane descended into Portland, Ava could already feel the ripple. The internet had split. Some praised her bravery, others called her a menace. But worse, people were beginning to question her version. That's what frightened her most. The moment she stepped off the plane, 2 men in suits were waiting. Not security, private, corporate. She clocked the insignia on their lapels, a subtle gold-winged logo, not the airline's official crest, but close enough to suggest they were inside the machine. Miss Mitchell, one of them said, we'd like to have a word. She paused, then smiled tightly. You're late. I've already started telling my side. The second man stepped closer. We'd appreciate it if you stopped. Ava didn't blink. And if I don't? He handed her an envelope, thick, heavy, confidential, stamped in red across the seal. Consider this an opportunity to move on, quietly. Ava peeled it open right there, scanning the first page, a non-disclosure agreement, accompanied by a settlement offer, a large one. Her eyes lifted. So you want me to take the hush money, she said flatly. No one's using that term. She folded the paper and slid it back in. I am. The man's jaw clenched. This is the last time we approach you with this kind of generosity. Ava stared him down. Then you're wasting your breath. She turned and walked off, her heels echoing through the terminal like gunshots. She called Lena again. Tell Jamal I want to file, full suit, defamation, targeted discrimination, unlawful detainment, everything, and find out what city that flight originated in. I want the names of every crew member on it. Lena hesitated. Are you sure, Ava? They're playing dirty. You go forward with this. You could lose more than your company. Ava looked up, eyes blazing. I already did, so I've got nothing left to protect but the truth. They booked her a cheap motel off the highway, but Ava didn't sleep. She sat at the small desk under flickering fluorescent light, pulling up screenshots, timestamps, archived posts from former employees whispering about the list. There was more here, a system, not a mistake. Her phone buzzed, blocked number. She picked up. A deep voice spoke. You don't know who you're up against. Maybe not, she said calmly, but you just reminded me why I can't back down. The line clicked dead. She set the phone down and looked in the mirror. Her reflection stared back, weary but unbroken. You wanted me out of first class, she whispered to herself. Now I'm taking the whole damn system apart. Then she opened a new document and began to write, how they tried to silence me, and why it didn't work. Rain hammered the windows of the motel like it was trying to drown the noise inside. Ava stood barefoot on the stained carpet, her phone pressed to her ear as she paced the room, her heart drumming like a warning bell in her chest. Jamal's voice came through the line, tense and quick. They've lawyered up hard. Voss's team filed a counterclaim. They're saying your story is fabricated, that you doctored the footage, that the so-called blacklist is just a risk management tool. They're spinning it as company protocol. Ava stopped mid-step. So now I'm the fraud. They're painting you as an opportunist, saying you weaponized race to manufacture a viral moment. She laughed, but it was hollow. Right. Because getting dragged out of first class and nearly arrested was part of my master plan. I'm not saying they have a case, Ava, but this move, it's meant to shake you, intimidate you into dropping the suit. Ava's grip on the phone tightened. Then, they miscalculated. She hung up and turned to Lena, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, clutching her laptop. The screen glowed with a paused video. It's from a former flight attendant, Lena said, her voice low. She reached out anonymously, says she worked on 3 flights where people of color were reassigned mid-boarding because their names were flagged in the system. Ava's brow furrowed. We have recordings? No voice memos. Just a chat log. But it's something. She says there's a supervisor who kept records, off books. Might still work out of LAX. Ava's mind clicked into motion. We find her. She won't go public, Lena said. Not unless she has backup. Then we give her backup. Lena nodded slowly. You're not scared, are you? Ava looked out the rain-smeared window at the glow of a gas station sign across the street. Terrified, she said, but fear's what they count on. And I don't owe them silence. Later that night, Ava sat in the dark, flipping through old messages, screenshots, media clippings. It was all there, the evidence, the patterns, the statements from others who'd been silenced, downgraded, labeled trouble. She was no longer the only name, but she was the loudest. Her burner phone buzzed, unknown number, again. She let it ring twice, then answered. You should have taken the settlement, a man's voice said. Calm, cold. You think your little crusade scares us? More than you want to admit, she said. Otherwise you wouldn't be calling. The voice paused. People like you burn fast, Ava. Get loud, get attention, then vanish. She leaned forward, whispering into the receiver. You sure about that? Click. A chill ran down her spine, not from fear but the certainty she was closer than ever. That this wasn't just a story about one airline, it was about power, and those terrified of losing it. The next morning she flew to LA under an alias, Angela Rivers, a name she hadn't used since college. Her blazer was gone, replaced with a hoodie and jeans, her hair pulled back into a bun. She moved through the airport like smoke, unnoticed and silent. Lena followed close behind, scanning faces, holding the burner phone. They met the whistleblower in a small diner near the airport. Her name was Renee Willis. Early 40s, tired eyes, the nervous energy of someone who'd kept secrets too long. She slid into the booth and stared at Ava with guarded respect. I saw what they did to you, Renee said. It was the same script they ran on Jamal Knight last year. Brilliant engineer. They flagged him as disruptive. He never flew again. Ava leaned in. You kept records? Renee nodded. Notes, emails, shift logs. I never deleted anything. I knew one day someone would come looking. Lena slid her a thumb drive. We'll encrypt them. Keep you safe. Renee hesitated. You need to promise something. Name it, Ava said. Burn them to the ground. Ava reached across the table, grasped her hand. We will. That night, back at the motel, the files opened like a trove of dark secrets. Names, flight numbers, reassignments, dozens of entries marked with a red tag, watch list override. All passengers were black or brown. Lena stared at the screen. This isn't just bias, it's infrastructure. Ava exhaled slowly. It's the whole damn machine. Her phone buzzed again. Jamal. We've got a window, he said. A judge in D.C. just agreed to hear the case, but we need to go public. Full blast. Renee's logs, your footage, the names. It's now or never. Ava looked at the files, then at her reflection in the mirror across the room. Tired, bruised, but unbroken. Drop it all, she said. Let the world see what they've been sitting on. Moments later, the post went live. They mocked me in first class. Now here's the list they didn't want you to see. Attached, video. Logs. Renee's statement. Ava's first recording from the plane. Within 30 minutes, it hit 200,000 shares, then 500,000. By midnight, dang Blacklist Exposed was trending across every platform. The war had come out of the shadows. And this time, Ava Mitchell wasn't fighting alone. The storm didn't come from the sky. It came from Ava's phone. As soon as her post exposing the airline's internal watch list hit the internet, the reaction was swift and explosive. Screenshots of passenger logs, red flag tags, racial patterns. They were undeniable. Ava had gone from a victim in 2A to the face of a movement, and the system was cracking under her weight. By noon, the hashtags were everywhere. Blacklist Exposed. Flying while black. Justice for Ava Major Networks picked it up before the airline could even craft a proper response. By the time the CEO, Richard Voss, finally appeared in a carefully staged press briefing, the damage had already deepened. His silver hair was combed perfectly, his navy suit crisp, but his jaw clenched a little too tightly. We take these allegations seriously, he began, eyes cold and rehearsed, but I want to be clear. There is no formal blacklist within our system. The safety of our passengers and crew is our top priority. Ava watched the press conference from her motel room, arms crossed, lips tight. She could see it. He was shaken, but still playing the game, still believing he could ride out the wave. Lena muted the volume. He thinks a statement will fix this. No, Ava said. He thinks I'll break under pressure before it gets worse. She turned toward the laptop. Jamal had just sent an encrypted link. Something big, he'd texted. Ava clicked it open and leaned in. The video loaded slowly, and then audio. Grainy at first, then clearer. A recording of a closed-door meeting. Voss's voice unmistakable. I don't care if it's optics or policy. We keep certain demographics out of first class when it causes disruption. I'm not losing high-paying clients over one activist with a camera. A chilling silence followed. Then another voice chimed in. Paul Grayson, the flight supervisor who'd confronted Ava on the plane. We've already flagged her. I'll have the crew move her next time she boards. The words felt like acid down Ava's throat. She turned toward Lena, her voice low and sharp. They weren't reacting. They planned it. That video wasn't just confirmation. It was conspiracy. Within the hour, the leak was online. Major outlets picked it up, and by afternoon, a congressional committee had announced a formal investigation. The Department of Transportation launched a probe. Civil rights groups flooded the airline's phone lines demanding action. And Ava's inbox was filled with messages, some grateful, some angry, some terrified. One email stood out. Subject, My Story. From Naomi Kelly. Ava opened it. Naomi was a nurse from Atlanta, black, who'd been removed from a flight for failure to comply after she questioned why her seat had been reassigned from business class to economy. She'd been quiet until now, ashamed, afraid. You gave me the courage to speak. If you need me, I'm here. Ava stared at the screen for a long time, then replied, I do need you. All of you. That night, Lena set up a Zoom call. They expected maybe a dozen people. Over 100 joined. Nurses, students, entrepreneurs, retirees. All black or brown. All with stories. All with a common thread. Removed, downgraded, dismissed, silenced. The screen flickered as faces came into focus. A man with salt and pepper hair and a broken voice. A teenage girl who barely spoke above a whisper. A middle-aged woman holding up a folder full of complaint letters that had gone unanswered. Ava listened, took notes, cried. Then she spoke. This isn't just about me. This is about all of us. And they think we'll go away if they fire one manager or write one press release. But we're not going away. We're getting louder. Applause burst from the tiny boxes on her screen. By morning, Ava's legal team had grown. Civil rights attorneys from New York, San Francisco, and Atlanta all offered pro bono support. Renee Willis, the former flight attendant, agreed to testify publicly. And someone had leaked more internal messages, chilling instructions sent to gate agents on reassignments to preserve customer experience. Then the twist came. Voss filed a countersuit. He claimed Ava had violated privacy laws by releasing internal communications. He painted her as a dangerous activist, driven by ego and fame, trying to dismantle a trusted brand. His legal filing included statements from 2 crew members who alleged Ava had threatened them, calling her aggressive, uncooperative, and hostile. It was the classic playbook. Turn the black woman into a threat. Ava paced the motel room, her phone clenched in one hand. They're trying to flip the narrative, she said. They want to turn me into the villain. Lena looked up from the laptop. Then let's beat them at their own game. How? We go live again. This time, they didn't just stream a video. They held a town hall, broadcasted across YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. Thousands tuned in. Ava sat on a folding chair in front of a blank wall. Nothing fancy, no production. Just her voice and the truth. She walked through the timeline, the seat theft, the live stream, the warning notice, the planted bottle, Renee's files, Naomi's story, the Zoom calls, and finally the leaked recording of Voss. This is systemic. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is discrimination, policy-backed, funded, and hidden behind smiling flight attendants and VIP lounges. Then she said the words that sent the movement soaring. You want to take me to court? Fine. I'll see you there. But know this, every step you take toward me, I take toward justice. The comments exploded. By the end of the broadcast, Ava Mitchell was no longer just a passenger in 2A. She was a leader of a civil rights reckoning 30,000 feet above the ground. And the turbulence was just getting started. It started with a whisper, then a wave, and now the whole country was watching. The federal courtroom in San Francisco buzzed with tension. Cameras lined the walls, and protesters chanted outside, their voices echoing through the marble halls. Inside, Ava Mitchell sat between her attorneys, spine straight, eyes unwavering. This was it. The final battle. Across the aisle, Richard Voss adjusted his cufflinks. Gone was the smug confidence he wore on camera. His face was pale, jaw clenched, and for the first time his designer suit looked like armor that couldn't quite protect him. The trial had moved faster than anyone expected. A class-action lawsuit, supported by dozens of passengers who had been red-flagged, removed, or humiliated mid-air for no good reason. Naomi Kelly testified. So did Renee Willis, the former flight attendant turned whistleblower. Even Mike, the quiet man from Ava's original flight, came forward with receipts, literal ones. Email threads, crew messages, and most damning of all, audio recordings. But the prosecution's ace came when Jamal, Ava's attorney, played the tape that had gone viral. I don't care if it's optics or policy. Keep certain demographics out of First Class. We don't need activists ruining customer experience. Voss's voice, clear, cold, calculated. The jury didn't flinch. Neither did Ava. When the verdict came, the courtroom fell silent. On all counts, we find in favor of the plaintiffs. A slow gasp spread like wildfire. Then cheers erupted, inside and out. Reporters scrambled, phones lit up. The chant from the crowd grew louder, pounding against the courthouse walls like a heartbeat. Ava, Ava, Ava. She didn't smile, not yet. Instead, she turned to her team, her voice soft but firm. It's a step, not the finish line. Outside, microphones swarmed her. Miss Mitchell, what does this verdict mean to you? It means the truth still matters, she said. It means we don't have to accept being treated like we don't belong. Not in First Class, not anywhere. A week later, the airline's board of directors announced Voss's resignation. Ellen Tate, the flight manager who once mocked Ava mid-flight, was subpoenaed in a separate federal investigation. Paul Grayson had already disappeared from public life, his name now synonymous with corruption. But Ava, she didn't disappear. She launched Altitude Equality, a nonprofit dedicated to holding transportation companies accountable. She spoke at universities, appeared on talk shows, even turned down a book deal to focus on policy reform. This wasn't a viral moment anymore. It was a movement. Still, the weight hadn't left her. One evening, sitting in her quiet apartment overlooking Oakland, Ava watched the original footage from the plane. Victor Hensley lounging in her seat, Lisa rolling her eyes, Paul threatening to remove her. She remembered the sting of humiliation, the burn of hot coffee, the twisted smile of a man who believed her place was at the back. She turned off the video and whispered to herself, "They picked the wrong woman." Later that night, she posted a message to her followers. Justice isn't a single moment, it's a series of choices. And sometimes it starts in seat 2A. The comments poured in. You gave me courage. They'll think twice before doing that again. You're not just flying high, you're lifting all of us. Ava replied to one, simple and honest. We're in this together. So if you're out there watching, if you've ever been made to feel small, silenced, dismissed, remember Ava Mitchell. Remember her seat. Remember her stand. And if you believe in stories that challenge injustice, that push the truth forward, that make the powerful squirm and the silenced roar, then like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Because we're not just telling stories, we're building something that lasts, and we're not landing anytime soon.